We'll call this meeting to order at 6:36. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda is actually a little different than normal. We did prepare a statement in regards to a lot of the questions and comments that everyone has brought forth that are open public comment sessions. So we're gonna provide hard copies of this. It'll also be links on our website and whatnot after tonight. And I believe it'll be linked in our meeting minutes going forward. So the board prepared a statement in response to the community comments and questions pertaining to COVID-19. The majority fall under these categories. Why is the board following the advice and guidance of the Agency of Education and the Vermont Department of Health? Are students ever allowed mask breaks or times with a teacher without a mask? Will the Mvsd board be requiring staff or students to be vaccinated? Who manages our federal and state grants, and how are the funds given to schools in response to COVID-19 managed? So in response to the first question, school districts and other public agencies have a right and a responsibility to implement reasonable health and safety measures. This is particularly true with the current transmission and illness related to COVID-19 pandemic. Last school year, under the governor's executive order, teams of healthcare and educational professionals designed mandatory guidance for schools during the state of emergency. This year, outside of an emergency order, the Mvsd board and nearly every school board in Vermont authorized their superintendents to develop procedures and responses to COVID-19 that follow the guidance and advice of the Department of Health and the Agency of Ed. Additionally, the governor has made it clear that he is urging school boards and school superintendents to follow the guidance of his administration. In making that decision, the board recognizes that the Vermont Department of Health are highly experienced and qualified medical professionals who are charged with preparing and responding to public health emergencies of Vermont citizens. Following the guidance of the state, although not mandatory, is the only responsible decision the school boards can make when facing matters affecting the public health of its students and staff. We have a link to the Vermont Department of Health frequently asked questions and information regarding COVID-19. Question 2, are students ever allowed mask breaks or times with teachers without a mask? Students have times to take off masks throughout the day, and when they get a drink of water, have a snack, eat lunch, or go outside. Teachers often find times to bring students outside for breaks and walks. Students with services such as SLP services can remove a mask under certain circumstances. 3, will the school board be mandating vaccines for staff and students? At this time, the Mvsd board is not considering a mandate for vaccines for their employees. We have been advised by the state of Vermont that they expect it will be required by the federal government, but we do not have details about that yet. If a mandate from Governor Scott is issued later, we will need to implement that requirement. As far as students, the Mvsd board is not considering and does not have the authority to mandate student vaccines. Mandating vaccines for children is a process that goes through the health panel and the Vermont state legislature. The question 4 was, who manages our federal and state grants, and how are the funds given to schools in response to COVID-19 managed? School districts receive many federal and state grants to support the education of students. No one individual is responsible for all aspects of applying for, managing, or reporting out on any of the grants. In general, the business office, including the business manager and the grants coordinator, work with the accounting and compliance of grants. While an educational administrator is responsible for writing the strategies and facilitating the implementation implementation of these strategies, this is also the case with many grants being awarded to schools in response to COVID-19. These grants are managed through the Vermont Agency of Ed grant management system. None of these grants are awarded based upon conditions such as vaccine rates or masking. In terms of grants targeted for the response to COVID-19, there have been 3 major pieces of legislation and funds associated with them. They are a very extensive list that goes well beyond what is shared here. The Agency of Ed has the information on all these grants and more on their website, which is also linked in the statement. Below is a list of grants that we have been awarded or in the process of applying for these grants. There's a lot of them, and given time, I wasn't going to read each individual one considering it's written down in the statement. There is information regarding each one, whether we are applying for or have been awarded already. But one note in regards to the grants, the last one listed is the one expected to be awarded to schools with high student vaccination rates. That grant is still in the planning stages at the state level, and we don't know the details to that as of yet. So as now, we'll move on to public comments. Robert, if you could send me the list of everyone in public attendance, or in, and then if anyone would like to make a comment that's virtual, just raise your hand and I will let Robert know and have you recognized, and then he can unmute you so that you can participate. And depends on how many comments, how many people want to comment, will determine how long we can allow each person to talk.
Chris, if you did receive that text from me, the first speaker is Casey Myers, Swanton. I can resend.
I did. I'm not seeing any online, so as of right now, we'll start with people in public attendance, and the first on the list is Casey Myers from Swanton. And the list has 6 people, so I would say 3 minutes per person.
Just talk. Just talk. I don't want to be rude, but I have definitely more than 3 minutes. 3 minutes, and there's only 6 people.
I do have a question though. I was wondering if Julie would mind answering if she thinks this school year has been successful so far this year, before I begin my 3 minutes.
Chris, do you want me to answer that question?
Yes.
Or Chris can, I don't mind which one.
I think it's been a very challenging start to the school year for families and for staff. It's been much more than anyone expected.
Okay, I guess, what does success look like to you for the school year? What would make the year successful?
Obviously, I want students in school. I want them learning and engaged and active in a traditional school day. That's what we all want for our students. And we are managing as best we can within the confines that we have in order to make that happen.
Thank you. So I apologize. I do have some things in here that have been answered. Some of them not, but there is a couple points that have been touched on, but. You can hear me? Okay. Okay. So last week, my 9th grader had 7 classes out of 20 due to quarantines. On Friday, he had 3 study halls out of 4 classes, and one of those classes was gym, where they combined his class with another inside. My son had about an hour of academics that day. My child did not get any part of an education last week. The school was a daycare, and I would have kept him home had I known this. The funny thing is, this was a problem. I, as a parent, was not happy that I was sending my child to school to sit in study halls, masked. So I called Mr. Hartman and I voiced my concerns and asked, how can we resolve this moving forward? And you know what he did? He talked to me for 20 minutes, validating the fact that he was hearing me, and we came up with some possible solutions. The reason this is funny is because any problem I have ever had with the school, I have been able to call teachers and/or staff and voiced my concerns, and almost always left satisfied and felt that my child was being taken care of in the right manner. This school board has not shown the same courtesy, not in the slightest. I would like to start off by saying that I am sick of being generalized as heathens and barbarians. As a group, we come to these meetings, whether they be virtual or in person, and have been demonized by yourselves in the media. It's an absolute disgrace and it needs to stop. We are not anti-mask. I am not anti-vax. We are being accused of being everything except what we actually are, and that is concerned parents. Our being here is not political and it's not about power. It's about the health of our children and nothing more. I have 3 children in this school district and my oldest is 14. I have never come to the school board outraged over any topic. I have had my issues with the school with learning abilities, bullying, and personal issues, and I've always been able to resolve my issues with the schools and teachers. The masking of our children begins with and continues because of the school board. Our teachers and staff face the same hypocrisy you inflict on our children. Therefore, I am here because I want my voice heard. I want my children's voices heard. Have some of us gotten a little heated during these meetings? Absolutely. But we sit up here and we voice our concerns and we simply ask that you hear us and respect us as parents, and we get nothing, absolutely nothing. The frustration comes from not knowing if any of you are even listening to us. Do you hear us when we say that masking our children is unhealthy? Do you hear us when we say that our children are voicing their concerns and their frustration? Because if you are hearing us, it would be nice for any of you to speak up. With that being said, I would like to say I'm well versed in the guidelines that are on all the school websites, as well as the links on the DOH and AOE. I have read and reread them. I'm seeking the data as to why these guidelines are simply the guidelines. I'm aware that you gave us why. But since school has started, myself and my children have complied to all regulations, and I'm simply trying to find out why. I would like to know how and why masks are seen as safe, why the DOH and the AOE believes they are keeping our children safe and preventing the spread of COVID. The only response I seem to get from these questions are the DOH and the AOE recommends it or it's science. I'm sorry, but this is no longer good enough. I'm a respectable person and I would like to continue to comply to these regulations, but it's getting more difficult the longer these questions go unanswered. Our kids and school staff are being told they have to wear a mask in order to stop the spread of COVID, and yet we have been flooded with classroom shutdowns, quarantine requirements, and quite literally the spread of COVID. Your mandates are not helping. Masks are not stopping the spread of COVID, and I'm finding it more and more difficult to make my children wear them without any kind of evidence that masks in fact protect them. Furthermore, in reading all the guidances from AOE, I have also read that as of June 15th, when the state of emergency was lifted, that the guidance from AOC was rescinded. If that's the case, why are we basing our mandates on these rescinded guidances? This year has already been no less than frustrating, and the hypocrisy of all the mandates and guidances are overwhelming. In a COVID-19 advisory memorandum dated September 8th, 2021, Daniel French and Mark Levine stated, "Thankfully, the science is clear. Vaccines are very effective at preventing COVID-19 cases. We know as a fact that vaccines do not stop the spread of COVID, and rather they lessen your symptoms once you get COVID. I also know for a fact that the majority of MVU COVID cases are with the vaccinated. The science is wrong. Vaccines are not only not effective at preventing COVID, they are false security, much like masks. You are not following science. You are simply following scientists who are telling you what to think. Some factual science is that viruses are transmitted through our nose and mouth. Thus, the idea that masks covering those entry points help prevent the spread of viruses. However, how many times a day do you think a person touches their mask or adjusts it or pulls it down to get a breather? How many times do you think a person touches their mask with dirty hands? Kids specifically? Have you ever watched a child pull their mask down to pick their nose and eat their boogers? Or watched a child pull down their mask to wipe their nose to notice it's filled with green snot? Or notice a child's mask soaked because they've been sucking on it? I could go on with these specific scenarios that I have seen for myself and just last week. But my point is, wearing a mask is actually causing us to touch our face. More importantly, our nose and mouth so many more times a day than if we were not wearing a mask. Hand washing is a million times more important, and I don't see mandates about that. I have also heard the argument that doctors wear masks during surgery and don't complain ever. They are warned to protect their patients from being exposed to anything that they unknowingly could be carried. Again, however, surgery rooms are sterile. Masks do not get touched ever, and if they do, it's with a sterilized hand. So unless every classroom is sterilized and you have a teacher with eyes on every student and getting them to not only wash their hands, but to change their mask after any interaction, they are being infected daily with germs by the simple fact of wearing them and it being unnatural. Finally, I had the pleasure of speaking to Karen Conroy, superintendent at the Canaan School. I'm sure you know them. They are the only school in the state of Vermont that has given parents the choice to mask or not mask their children. It's ironic that they are having such a successful school year so far. Out of 180 kids, they have only had 3 parents voice concern over universal masking, and out of those 3 children, one of them is being tuitioned to another school. Other than 3 families, they have had support from their community. They have had COVID cases in their school, but nothing alarming. In fact, they have been traceable, and they are finding that cases are being contracted between one-on-ones in closer settings. For example, our guidance at our school is that if a student is in need of a one-on-one, they're allowed to take their masks off. Mrs. Conroy believes the secret to preventing the spread of COVID is not masking, but rather distancing. I applaud these opinions because they are based on what is actually happening at the school. These opinions that allude to guidelines are being made based on what the successes in the school are, not from a department that's not experiencing day-to-day operations. I am frustrated that you as a school board have made the decisions to mandate masks in school when they have only been recommendations. Without Vermont being in a state of emergency, the state has no jurisdiction to make the mandates. Therefore, these decisions are either being put on to the board or solely on the superintendent. It's time to get off your power tower and listen to the parents. Give them the choice. We've already had an overwhelming amount of COVID in our district. It's time to try something new. I also found out from Mrs. Conroy that they have had 2 situations where they have had to shut down classrooms and the teacher had to quarantine. Oddly, they had those 2 classes remote and the children were still getting an education and were not marked absent due to the forced quarantine. Why are these temporary situations not being enforced in our schools? Why are our children being forced to quarantine when they are not sick and not receiving their education and being marked absent? I'm disappointed in this school board and the lack of communication you have had with this community, and specifically with these parents who are trying to get their children's voices heard. I am not here to scold you or tell you what you are doing wrong, but I am here questioning you, and that is not wrong. I do believe that these mandates are hurting my children, and you are not allowing them a voice. That's not right. Your focus is on stopping the spread of COVID and getting rid of it, but your focus needs to be on accepting it and learning to live with it. Your decisions need to stop being based on hypotheticals. Healthy children should not be quarantining. We need to go back to what we have done for years, and that's simply stay home when you are sick. Our children have a 99.9% survival rate from COVID. Stop the mandates. Let families decide what they feel is safe. Don't you find it odd that with as scary and deadly as COVID is, that thousands of people can pack a Patriots football stadium, but our children, the least vulnerable, have to stay masked and quarantined in classrooms? We live in a free country. My husband doesn't miss years of his children's lives to fight for your freedoms, to have you turn around and strip our kids of theirs. Our children are not in danger of COVID. Let them start living their lives. They have already had years of normalcy stripped away. Thank you.
Let's see. Next up is Stephanie Menard from Swanton. And I will say I would request that if we could try to be a little closer to the 3-minute time limit, I would appreciate it.
Sorry, this won't take long. So I had an incident with my son at the school as well, with the quarantine, and I went to the school personally, and I want to personally apologize to Mr. Palmer. I'm sorry that I did go off like that. It was uncalled for, but you can understand my frustrations as well. I sent an email to the state legislator because that is what they directed me to do, because we have gotten nowhere with the board. We shouldn't have to be here fighting for our children's education, and we are, and it's sad. I know this email was sent to the 3 school board members in Swanton. I have yet to receive a response, so I'm going to read it. I did take some of the pieces out to make it a little shorter tonight for the 3 minutes, but I would like a response on this because it's not okay. My name is Stephanie Menard, and my son just started his first year at MVU. Like most everybody, COVID has had its effects on our community, especially the children, as they do not even know what normal is anymore. Governor Scott said that when Vermont hit the 80% vaccination rate, he would lift all state mandates. Vermont succeeded, and he did just that. 2 weeks before school started, our school board made the decision to mask our children in schools. Our school board made this decision because Governor Scott had made a statement that it is highly recommended for our children to be in masks, but I cannot mandate without a state of emergency. I have gone to school board meetings where we have yet to receive any answers, and it feels as though they do not listen to us parents. I am not against masks. I am against the school mandate. This should be a choice for the parents to make on the safety of our own children. My husband, myself, and my son stood in the park on 9/11 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. because a school board member had reached out to me wanting to have an open discussion, as I was pretty heated that day. I was heated because all of us parents whose child goes to MVU had received paperwork in the mail to tell them whether or not our child or children had been vaccinated. This comes 2 days after Governor Scott announces that there's a $2 million grant for schools to receive a portion if they hit the 80% vaccination rate for our children. That's not right. It's completely wrong. They are using our kids for money. We all get paperwork in August just before school starts for doctors, dentists, physicals, checkups, the normal stuff, but nothing about COVID vaccination statuses. Governor Scott says this, and all of a sudden, 2 days later, we get paperwork. This proves it has nothing to do with the safety and everything to do with money. Going back to the school board member, we met with Tobias McGuire. He reached out through Facebook Messenger, and we met that evening. I thought it was a good conversation, and for the first time, I felt as though I was heard and we got both sides and something accomplished. Tuesday on 9/14, Tobias sends me a message out of nowhere, and it reads as follows, I quote, Stephanie, I'm not trying to push any vaccine on your family, and I'm not judging your decision at all. But if you are friends with anyone with a child at MVU who has been vaccinated, we could all use your help to remind them to send in their proof of vaccination attestation, if they are okay with sharing that info with the school. If we can get the 80%, even with those not wanting to get vaccinated, we will likely all be happy and in a better spot. Not asking you to convince anyone of anything, just help reminding those you know who have been vaccinated to get the paperwork in. Thank you for your consideration, and no worries if you would rather not. Have a great night. Just an FYI, this isn't coming from the board. It's just me trying to help. We might be at the 80%, who knows? I'd hate not to be there because someone forgot to turn in paperwork. This is a win-win for everyone. If we just make sure everyone that has had the vax has turned the paperwork in, we are going to be a lot closer to getting what we hope to have, unquote. How wrong is that? He clearly knew where I stood with all of the vaccination and COVID regulations and still sent me this to try and help the school get money. Our children are not pawns. They are not there. They are there to receive an education. And as a taxpayer, this is how I get in return for a response. So what happens if the school hits the 80%? Do the children who are vaxxed get to go maskless while the children who do not get the vax still have to wear a mask? Are they going to be separated in different rooms? Are they going to be subjugated to J-pod and D-pod and C-pod? I ask because our governor has already lied to us and contradicted himself many times, and now the school is doing the same. This vaccination is not FDA approved. It causes problems in children, and that has been all over the news as well. Masks work according to Dr. Levine. Okay, so Friday 9/17, the school calls me at 1:43 p.m. I don't get reception at work, so at 1:45, I called the school back from my phone at my store. Beth, who is the receptionist, answers and tells me she does not know why I got a call and transfers me to his teacher where I had to leave a voicemail. 2 o'clock, I leave work as I do every day to go pick my son up from school. 2:20, my son's calling me and asks me where I am. Confused, I said, I'm in the school parking lot waiting for you. He was at grandma's already. I then went to see him and was told that the school had called my husband and said Buddy had been exposed to COVID on 9/15 and needed to be picked up immediately. I was pretty fuming. If these kids are in a mask for 7.5 hours a day, but they still get sent home if they are considered close contact, then what's the point of them being in a mask to begin with? Buddy has roughly 18 kids in his classroom. Only 6 of the kids in that area were sent home, and not all were from his class. If he was exposed on 9/15, the school finds out on 9/17, 48 hours, mind you, but could not wait an extra 45 minutes longer for school to get out for him to be picked up makes absolutely no sense. I had to wait until the 22nd to get him tested, and if it's negative, he can return. Right now, I am not sure he will be returning to school. I am frustrated, angry, upset, and anything in between. Thankfully, I am a good parent, and I asked my son, I said, do you want to go back to school? This was the Friday that this was last Friday, and he said, yes, I want to go back to school, but I'm going to wait until Monday. If he would have said no, I would have kept him out. My son loves school. He wants to be there. As parents, we encourage a good education, but how can we do that when there's no school? This needs to stop. Our kids deserve the education that we pay for. We are their parents and we are responsible for them. I do not co-parent with the school. I do not co-parent with the government. If as a parent, my child misses so many days of school, by law, truancy, I might add, the school must contact DCF and welfare to do a check on us to make sure that our kids are doing okay. But yeah, if the school pulls them out for close contact, it's okay. MVU sent an email today, which I'm not on the email list, which I need to get on. A parent actually sent me this because she was really upset about it, about the importance of our kids going to school and the attendance records. So my question is, if we keep our kids out of school, it's a problem, whether it be for vacation, they are sick, or for whatever reason, if they miss so many days, technically the school can file a truancy law on the parents and get DCF involved. But if you guys pull our kids out of school because of a close contact, that's okay. You know, there's kids in Bakersfield right now that have been quarantined 3 times since school started. 3 times. School's been in session for 2 months. How many times do you think these kids have been in actual classrooms? We're either going to do in-person learning or we're going to do remote. You can't have both. You can't keep sending our kids home, period. And the next time I get a phone call and I try and call the school back and I don't get an answer on why they called me, there's going to be bigger problems. I'm going to have to go somewhere else. I've already gone to the Board of Education. Where do I go next? Do I go to the governor? No kidding. I've already gone to the legislator. This is not okay. I do want a response to this email and I expect one in my email, please. Or tonight, I don't care. Either way. I should not have to stand here and fight for my child to get an education. He's 12. He wants to be at school. This is our future. And our future is getting sent home for a close contact, even though they're wearing masks. Either they work or they don't work. You got to pick one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Tammy Underwood from Swanton. And once again, I would really appreciate if you could stay with the 3 minutes, because we are starting to run well over our public comments time.
Don't worry, I won't bore you too long. I've been to just about every board meeting that you've had this year, and I'm sure you all know who I am. And actually, I'm getting sick of hearing my own voice because it's like talking to the wall. So I'm just going to hit some high points. One of the things that I really wanted to do tonight is I wanted to play a video for you. And I know you're not going to be able to see it, but you're at least going to be able to hear it. And I really want you to think about this when you're listening to it. It's by a Dr. Stillwagon out of Florida. And I really want you to think about what he's saying, because everything that we're being told about COVID right now up here and by the federal government is bull. Listen to somebody that actually knows what they're talking about, that will actually stand up on his principles and give you real science. If the Wi-Fi will kick in.
I don't have any control over this Wi-Fi. I'm sorry.
It's spinning.
you're making some really bad decisions based on fear of a virus that has about a 99% survival rate for most of us. That is unsubstantiated fear. So let me give you a couple of things to truly be fearful about. That mask that you keep insisting that people wear decreases the amount of oxygen in your lung tissue. We now know that this virus uses something called a furin cleavage site to merge with your lung tissue to infect you. And it works better with decreased oxygen. And peer-reviewed research clearly shows that wearing a mask increases your chances of developing an upper respiratory infection 13 times more than a person not wearing a mask. So I would stop wearing a mask immediately if I were you. Secondly, this shot that you insist on people getting gives you absolutely no protection against infection. It is the innate immune system that protects you from infection by using dendritic cells, T cells, and natural killer cells without antibodies ever becoming involved. This shot has one goal, and that goal is to make antibodies. These antibodies circulate inside of you and cannot prevent an infection. They can only react to something that has already gotten inside of you. They cannot keep something out. The shot decreases the ability of your innate immune system to keep viruses out by 60%. And a booster shot will reduce it even more. Even worse, the antibodies that are created by this shot can no longer neutralize variants and actually enhance the virus ability to infect you. It should be painfully obvious to you by now that fully vaccinated people are getting sick. And this will continue to get worse if you keep trying to jab people while a virus is trying to spread. The variants are emerging from the vaccinated population. This so-called vaccine is still being administered on what's called an emergency use authorization. It is not FDA approved. The FDA approved a biological licensing application for a product called Comirnaty. The application was approved, not the product. Comirnaty is not available in the United States. Therefore, by law, you cannot force people to take this drug without informed consent and without animal trials to prove that it is safe. Mayor Demings, please look at me. You, sir, are in violation of the United States Constitution and the Nuremberg Code. You will be held accountable. Good day.
All right, thank you for your comment.
I know that mimics a lot of what I've been saying, but people really need to start listening to this, especially the people that are in masks all day and the people that have already been vaccinated. I'm not trying to tell people what their belief systems are, but it really makes me sad that people are making decisions based on fear and because somebody else told them to do it. They should be researching these things themselves and making their own health decisions. Most people put more effort and research into buying a car than they do to putting this stuff in their bodies or putting on a mask and depleting their immune system. This is insane and it needs to stop. And like everybody else has been saying, these are our children. We do not co-parent with a school board or with a state government or with a federal government. It really isn't any of your business what we do with our kids. And the fact that they've actually tied money to our schools being able to add something to a budget on the backs of our kids' health. I understand that there were added expenses for certain things when COVID hit. Remote learning was a nightmare. extra cleaning, extra this, extra that. But with the amount of money that I see having been received and what's slated to be received, on top of what we vote in and pass every March, I find it really hard to believe that you're not supplanting instead of supplementing, which it says right in here you are not supposed to do. I've looked at the operating budget, and although it gives us expenditures and some of the revenues, I've read financials most of my life. And I'd like to know where the other revenue is that's not identified in here, because you're only identifying $8.9 million worth of revenue on the operating budget. So if you take that away from the expenditures that you've put in here, the net result is 28.9 million, but in the negative. So obviously there's more revenue. So I don't think what we vote in every March is accounted for in here. What we really need to see is a balance sheet and a P&L, which I believe we also have a right to see, because the devil is in the details. I am not against getting money to help with COVID. I know it's been a nightmare, but it has to be done fiscally responsible. And I have my doubts as to whether that's happening or not. And I understand that there's been reimbursement requests, and I see that in the documents that you were able to provide for us. But I want to see the documents that went with those reimbursements when you had to actually send it into the government and ask for your money. Because I know they asked for backup documentation, vendor receipts, POs. I see on the line items where it says you were going to spend the money. Now I'd like to see where you actually spent the money. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. And just to double down on that ridiculous vaccine letter that was sent to us, I cannot believe that you want to just get your numbers up in order to hit an 80% mark, just so you can tell my unvaccinated son that we've hit 80%, and some of your friends can take their mask off, but you can't. Especially when Governor Scott turned around and said, oops, well, I'm gonna take that back now. We're gonna mask till the end of the year. So it's all bullshit. And it's just to get money. And you know what? I could care less if we get money. Because I ended up having to pull my kid out of school anyway, because I was forced into that position. And that's not right either, but it was the best choice for my son. And to tell you the truth, from what I've seen, the curriculum that we purchased leaps and bounds above what he was getting in school. So I have absolutely no regrets. And he's still a straight A student. So please stop trying to balance your budget on the backs of our kids. And the fact that there's a statement on the end of that information that you gave us that said there's going to be potential additional grant money from Governor Scott based on vaccination rates, you have got to be kidding me. And you have the option to turn that money away because it hasn't been received yet. And I challenge all of you to put our kids first and actually turn that money away. Because that's going to tell me everything I need to know about all of you. Thank you.
Next up is Steve Martell.
Good evening. The vast preponderance of scientific studies, dozens and dozens, show robust, long-lasting immunity after COVID infection. An Israeli study of 1.5 million people showed that natural immunity is longer lasting and stronger as compared to vaccinated immunity. Given that info, are students who have had COVID and recovered, are they considered part of the 80% goal, or are they still listed as unvaccinated, even though natural immunity is better than being vaccinated? Are you going to continue to ignore the science forever, to listen to political hacks working at the CDC? You do know the FDA director ignored the advice of the majority of its voting scientists who voted against allowing the booster shot to go forth. This guy is acting more like a political hack. The CDC's own figures estimate that at least 120 million Americans had been infected with COVID-19 by the end of May. thus possessing superior natural immunity. So it is likely that there are many kids in school who have had COVID previously and have natural immunity. You want them to take an unapproved vaccine that is more likely to kill or disable them compared to just relying on their natural immunity. Yet once again, I am sure they are not considered part of your 80% goal. The VAERS keeps track of all the COVID-19 vaccine adverse reactions. As of 9/17/21, there have been 66,000 people hospitalized after receiving the vaccine. Almost 21,000 have been permanently disabled, and there have been 15,386 deaths from the vaccine. So you're telling me that the 15,386 deaths and 20,789 permanently disabled are acceptable losses? And speaking of your 80% target, what percentage of students at MVU are currently vaccinated? You must have that data now. Everybody must have been giving you their sheets by now. So it'd be nice to know. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Okay, next up is Caleb Underwood from Swanton.
I'm gonna pass.
He's gonna give his minutes to whoever needs the extra time.
Me as well, that's Peter Underwood.
Okay. Next up is Peter Underwood.
I passed mine on to.
Okay. I'm not seeing anybody online with their hands raised.
I'm gonna take a minute of theirs. I'm not on the list. My name's Chelsea Lumbra. You all know me. I just want you to look at me because here I am, healthy and well, recovered from COVID in the last month. And my children, my husband, my entire extended family, all healthy and well. There are other members of this esteemed community that are all healthy and well after recovering from COVID. And I just want to speak to any parents out there who are afraid of what COVID might do to their kids. I just want to tell you really quickly, my 4- and 3-year-old, both positive for COVID, and we're better in less than 24 hours. They had a fever of 101, 102, totally normal. Normal day for them, busy outside, active, healthy, well, went to bed, woke up, totally fine. So I want people to understand that the fear that you receive is not accurate. There are lots of children in our community that have had COVID and survived and healthy and well. And they're, minimally, if at all, affected. And so I just want you all to sort of bring some peace to your mind and peace to your heart that if your children are infected with COVID, they are going to be all right. And so I just want people to have an idea of COVID in your community, and COVID in your community is just fine. We're okay. So have no fear.
Thank you. I believe that concludes our public comments. Once again, looking online, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so that will bring a conclusion to our public comments portion of our agenda. And at this time, we'll move on to agenda review. We do have one agenda review or amendment. The Act 173 presentation wasn't supposed to be on the agenda, so that's being striked. I don't have any other amendments. Do you, Julie?
No, I don't. Thank you for that.
Okay. So at this time, we'll move on to consent agenda. First up, I'd entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from September 16th. Devin's the first. Joanne's the second. Any discussion? Toby.
Wait for it, Toby.
Okay, sorry, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes.
So in our packets, I saw, this is kind of interesting. The meeting minutes in there are for August 19, 2021. Is anyone else seeing that as well? That's what I see in my meeting folder. And the ironic thing of that is, I was reviewing it as if it was the meeting we just passed or just made a motion on, but my name wasn't on as a board member present on the 19th. So I didn't know where to comment. I'm not trying to confuse things, but do you follow, Chris? Do you see what I'm saying, or other board members?
Devin.
You gotta unmute, Devin.
Takes a second.
I gotta wait for to be unmuted. I think there was an email that had the meeting minutes from last meeting, because you're right, the ones in the shared drive I think were from August. So I think we had received them in an email. So I
Right.
don't know if you had a
So
chance to review
I'm
them.
okay with the motion and the actual minutes we're passing the motion on, but the August 19th need to be fixed. It doesn't list me as present. So I guess I didn't know where to bring that up, but I thought this would be the best spot.
Okay, we can
Yes,
adjust the
Toby.
August 19th minutes to add Toby, and Don has a question. Don, you have to unmute. It takes a second.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Is the host going to keep us unmuted all night? I mean, or muted, or is that just something we did for the public comments?
You're all set after I ask you to unmute.
Okay, because I kept getting messages. Chris, I tried to unmute when you did the agenda. There's an item on the agenda that I heard about last night regarding a resignation. And when we arrive at that point, I would like to request an executive session with the finding being personnel.
Okay, when we get to that, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the September 16th meeting minutes? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand.
Chris, I'm not sure you see there's a screen called second screen with a hand up. I don't know if that's a board member. I'm not sure.
What was that?
There's a tile that says second screen.
Yep.
They had a thumbs up and a hand up. I don't know who that is, if it's a board member to vote.
It is, that's Terry.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Recognize that.
So the motion carries 6-0.
And we will fix those minutes and make sure they're in that drive.
Terry, you have your hand raised. Was that for voting, or do you have a comment?
Just voting, thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Under presentations, we have an Esser and Kovid grant overview presentation.
So in answer to a lot of people's questions, and we did put some information and some links to Agency of Ed websites about how much has been allocated to our school district from various federal grants and how they're managed. It is very confusing. A lot of people throw out a lot of acronyms and names of different grants. So we wanted to go and speak a little bit with some little different level of specifics about the kinds of the actual funds that we have available to us and the kinds of activities that are that we are planning for or that we have spent money on. And then the big grant that will be used in the future that will need a lot of stakeholder input on in that process. So I'm going to have the business manager, Laura McAllister, share her screen and walk the board and the participants through that information.
Okay. Can you now see the financial statement, Julie?
I can, but can you make it bigger? Because I don't know about other people sitting in front of their computers, but it's kind of hard to see.
It's difficult at this size. So.
I think that's about as large as I can make it on my screen. So hopefully that's a little bit better.
Yep, and we can make this available to people on a link in the future.
And it is in the shared drive for the board. And this was distributed to some community members that requested some information as well. But yes, we can have this information posted on the website. So for the board, I know we've been presenting COVID expenses periodically to you in kind of a formalized financial report. But as Julie said, I think due to the level of detail and the volume of funds that we're receiving from different funding sources, I think it's important to kind of break those down further for you. I think, it's quite a complex financial time for school districts. Typically fiscal grants do not pass different fiscal years. That is not the case with these COVID grants, or at least some of these COVID grants. As you can see in this chart, if you look across the top columns, we're talking fiscal year 20, which was 2 years ago now, 2 fiscal years ago, operating years ago, all the way to fiscal year 24. People also refer to these grants differently. We talk about CARES Act, we talk about Esser, we talk about CRRSA, and so oftentimes that becomes confusing as well. There are also local grants that we have applied for and received from nonprofit organizations for things like food service support or other food service related supplies and materials. So I just want to take a minute. I'll try to speak slowly enough so you can kind of follow along. I think sometimes I go a little too fast, but basically if you look at the top of this chart, you'll see that we track, starting on the left, we track everything that we receive here in our office as required by fund. The federal grants are definitely tracked this way separately. I tried to provide a little bit of a description there at the top. And so you can see all the different, several grants that we've received. And then across the top, as I said, there are the different fiscal years. You'll notice the revenue column and then an expense column totaled at the end, and then a balance column if there's a remaining balance or an allocation that is yet to be spent or applied for. The largest grants that I want to point out are the Esser Grants. That's Esser 1, Esser 2, and Esser 3. There's also an ARP IDEA B Esser. First, let's start with Esser 1. That allocation was primarily spent in fiscal year 21. That was about $741,487. We are now receiving that revenue in this fiscal year, but it was applied for at the end of and spent and applied for at the end of fiscal year 21. If we move down to Fund 2137, that was Esser 2. We are just now utilizing or applying for that allocation. That's going to be used in fiscal year 22. As you can see, our expenses to date are about $330,000. We've encumbered another $961, and our revenue is about 1.2. So we've received some of that allocation already from the Department of Ed. We still have a remaining 2.2 million over here on the right that is yet to be budgeted for or allocated. It is available to us, but yet to be spent. Now, if we talk about ARP Esser or Esser 3 on the bottom, sorry, my screen is jumping. As you can see, nothing has been spent between fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 22. And we still have $7.9 million available to us. That's the largest pot of money that we would be receiving. Other than that, these other grants, you see the general No Kid Hungry grant, CRF, LEA, summer food. Most of those have very specific purposes. I tried to outline those. There's workforce stabilization. The ARP IDEA B is specific to special ed needs. And CRF HVAC was specific to HVAC, and then you can see the food related items. So I don't know if the board has questions about this before I jump to the other document I tried to create. Basically what I was trying to show you here was the span of time and the utilization of these different grants that we've received.
Do these grants require
I'll get into more detail in the next slide as far as the specifics around the Esser grants.
Yeah, can we ask a question, please?
Chris, I'm not sure you picked it up, but a couple of the folks in the audience are wondering if they can ask questions.
Are these 100% grants or is there a required match?
What are the requirements to receive this money is what we would like to know.
Let me make sure Chris is. There you go.
Sorry, I was unable to unmute. What was your question? I couldn't hear you.
What are the requirements to get these grants?
Is there a required match or is this 100% funded by the feds?
Yeah.
Is it okay if I answer, Chris?
Yes, please.
There is no required match for any of these grants that are listed here. The only requirement for any of these, well, I would say any of the federal grants, the only requirement is that we follow federal grant compliance and regulations, which is fairly strict. There is, specific auditing that happens. There's procurement rules. So pretty strict compliance, but other than that, there's no requirements. I would say for a few of the.
So my last question.
I was gonna finish answering that question first. I just have a few other details.
Go ahead. Yep, sorry.
I just wanted to be clear that some of the smaller ones from nonprofits, like the No Kid Hungry grant, there was a requirement that we just simply, not as stringent as a federal grant, but we simply provide them with documentation stating that how we serve students with those smaller grants. And we've done that as far as, supplementing our food service program, adding, providing materials to deliver meals to families and things like that.
Awesome. So my last question is, with all of this money that hasn't been spent yet, why are there no ventilation systems in the schools? Why is there no air conditioners? And why do my children complain to be cold in their classrooms if all of this money has yet to be spent?
Would you like me to answer that, Chris, or?
Yes.
So specifically to HVAC or air quality, I can tell you that the CRF HVAC funds, the $311,000 we applied for as much funding as that we could get. We applied for every need that we have in most of our buildings. We were approved for $311,000. That did provide some HVAC work in each one of our buildings, except for Highgate, which was not approved. It did provide unit ventilators, 20 new unit ventilators at MVU. But it did not pay to have them installed. That is being installed now with a different funding source. We did with CRF LEA, the 2133 fund. We did spend a good portion. I don't have the exact number. I can get that to you on air purifiers before the beginning of the school year in fiscal year 20. Or when COVID happened, when kids returned to school, I should say, for air purifiers that are basically the best that we could get at that time for each classroom and each building. There will be additional HVAC funding available specific through Efficiency Vermont. The AOE has not released the terms on that yet. And I can tell you that there are discussions to utilize ARP Esser funding to address capital projects as well, but there would be required approval by the AOE on any contract projects. It's quite a lengthy approval process, and there would also need to be stakeholder engagement, which is also quite an involved process to be prior to spending ARP Esser. And I will talk to that point a little bit more in the next slide.
So that is in the works. That's what you're saying, like that.
I think we've done what we've been available to do up to this point. We've maximized the funds that we have to the extent possible. There is planning for additional HVAC work if approved by the Agency of Ed as a proper funding source, and the community gives input that is something that they find valuable and appropriate.
And what about air conditioners and proper heat in the winter?
I can address that. We've actually been working on upgrading the heat system in Franklin. We're looking at upgrading the system in Highgate. Mvsd was recently upgraded. We're still looking at maintaining that. And Swanton's is also been upgraded or in the works of being upgraded. There is line items in our budgets that we build. We're trying to get more proactive and less reactive when it comes to facilities.
Okay, thank you. So you're trying, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Laura, we can move on.
Okay. So I will say, I think it's kind of an important point from my perspective as a business manager that, you know, these ESSER funds, which I'm trying to outline here, do come with massive amounts of federal regulations. There are countless hoops to jump through before this money can be spent. I myself, along with every business manager in the state, sit with the AOE and their federal grant people every Wednesday and talk about the rules. The rules are being developed, you know, it's a plane that's being built as they're flying it. Rules have changed multiple times and we're really working hard to try to stay on top of those. But I just think it's an important point that these funds are very, very regulated and strict to use. And it's, I think the Agency of Ed is doing what they can to help us through that process, but it's still a federal grant process. And so lots of hoops to jump through. So I just think that's important to note. But here, what I'm trying to outline is the largest funding sources that we have that were on the last sheet that I shared with you, but there's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ARP IDEA B ESSER, and then there's ARP ESSER 3. What I thought was important was to state here the periods of performance as outlined by the Agency of Ed. And so you can see the period of performance for ESSER 1 is March 13th, so sort of the start of the pandemic, through September 30th, 2022. Then the application deadline for that is March 20th. What I'm trying to do in this third row is point out the Mvsd target utilization. We're working very hard to try to target our expenses and plan for our expenses while still being able to manage the grants. And so we're trying to break them into buckets and be really strategic about how we spend those funds and plan for the future. And so ESSER 1, our target utilization was March 2020 through August 2021. Those funds have been spent, they've been applied for. Reimbursement requests have been submitted and those funds have been received back to Mvsd. ESSER 2, it's 3.5 million. The period of performance on those funds is March 13th, 2020, again, start of the pandemic, to September 30th, 2023. So a full year past the ESSER 1 deadline. The application deadline is November 1st for those funds. We are just working on that application now. ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, we were in a bit of a reactive mode. So especially for ESSER 1 and then partially with ESSER 2, reacting to the needs of the schools and reacting to COVID. And now we're working through the, further planning and trying to be able to plan more for the future. The target utilization for ESSER 2 is September 2021 to August 22 for Mvsd. And so we're utilizing this for this school year that we're in right now and to get us through next summer. Hopefully.
And Laura, I just want to make sure that the board understands the connection here. The ESSER 2 money is the money that's tied to our recovery plan, where we are expected to have and do have approved strategies in social, emotional, and well-being, truancy and engagement, and academic achievement. And the focus and big push for schools last spring was to have robust summer programming and make sure that we have services in place for kids who would be coming back to school after some of them not being in school full time for quite a while. So that was the main focus there. So the majority of our planned expenses are in those categories. And some things are generally acceptable, such as health, if you need another nurse or you need more things like that. Sorry, Laura, I want to make sure to make that point.
Julie or Laura, is there an outline somewhere about the ESSER 2 and what is being proposed in order to prioritize those needs, academic achievement, social, emotional well-being, student engagement, and truancy? Is there a document somewhere with the planned use of funding for those specific measures?
There's a recovery plan that is on our website, and I have to double check with our curriculum director as to where that is placed. But there's really two aspects of it. One is the recovery plan, which is an instructional strategy focused, professional learning for teachers, instructional coaches, interventionists, those kinds of things. And then we build a budget around that. But the recovery plan is available, and I will make sure that that link is.
And that includes the details on like how these are going to be measured and met?
In the recovery plan, it does.
Okay, thank you.
And I can tell you as recent as today, the curriculum director, myself, and the grants management team we're working through the ESSER 2 application where I'm tying strategies in the budget pages, which is literally function and object. So down to the accounting code tied to the different strategies in the recovery plan and making sure that those line up and they're appropriate. And that's what gets submitted in the GMS or the online grants management system.
Okay.
So I guess the only other thing that I wanted to point out, thank you, Julie, for jumping in, is just this ARP ESSER column. That's ESSER 3. That is our largest pool of money. I think it's important that we understand that the period of performance, again, is from March 13th, so the start of COVID, just like every other grant, but the period of performance goes through September 30th, 2024. We have yet to be told by the Vermont Agency of Education when the application deadline is for that. They will not be releasing that information or announcing it until their Vermont Agency of Ed plan, recovery plan, is approved by the federal government. It has been submitted, but it has not been approved. And we know that most other plans submitted by other states have had to come back for edits and adjustments. And so we're anticipating that it'll still be a bit longer before we have that information. Not to say that we're not already trying to plan for that and how we will engage in meaningful stakeholder engagement. So the target utilization for Mvsd for ESSER 3 right now is September 22, so the start of the 22 school year through August 24. And you can see there underneath the ESSER 3 column some things that we're thinking about, continuing initial initiatives that we have already put in place, things like tutoring and intervention and supporting our summer programming, that we've initiatives again that we've engaged in so far, but then there are some other items that we're thinking about as well. But the big point here is that meaningful stakeholder engagement is absolutely required. There's actually a template that's been issued by the Agency of Ed on all the stakeholders that need to be involved. And that will need to happen prior to applying for any of these funds, nonetheless, utilization of those funds. And then I guess I would just point out that, again, the recovery domains are here listed. Those are in our recovery plan that we've created. And I've tried to more specifically list some items that these grants have been or will be, or we're preliminary planning for spending these funds to support.
Thank you, Laura. We have Devin and then Terry.
Thanks for all that, Laura. I was wondering if either you or maybe Julie could give a little more detail on what that meaningful stakeholder engagement is, or what it would be, who those stakeholders are, how we might go about that, even if the planning is preliminary at the moment.
Laura, do you have the template? And
I
there's
can find it quickly. Yes,
I know, because I have a copy of it that Laura shared, but I'd have to troll through my email for it. It includes, obviously, board members, parents, community members, business folks, but it also includes disability advocates, civil rights advocates, mental health providers, medical professionals, and so forth. We also know that if we want to do something, because it's a large pot of money and it's one-time money, right? So a lot of things you want to do are something that might be make a substantial difference long-term for students in learning. So if you wanted to, Laura gave examples, if there were construction or HVAC improvements or any kind of improvements to the building that we thought might be eligible, we would have to do it in 2 stages. We would have to throw out some of these ideas, engage with stakeholders. It might be through surveys, like a thought exchange, It might be through online forums. There'd be a variety of ways that we could do it. But we have to document that we've reached out to folks. And that would be even just to get prior approval to see if we could even do those things with that money. And then before submitting a larger budget for the whole allocation, we would have to engage in even further stakeholder involvement. The list is quite long and thorough. Did I miss a stakeholder group? Well, I feel like I did.
Maybe, I'm sorry, Julie, I have about 40 screens open. I can add that to the website as well with the other documents to have them available. Or I can keep looking for it.
I know, I'm trying to make a list.
I can put the link in the chat since most people are, or a lot of people are online too. We can do that too.
There's no chat tonight.
Oh, okay.
Great. I think, Chris, one of the things that we can do is the document that you read that has some more detail, and we did amend it a little bit and add to it. We can put links to the recovery plan. We can put links to the documents Laura shared.
I just found both of them also, the recommendations for meaningful engagement with stakeholders and the ARP Esser LEA plan template.
I agree. We can add those links to make it easier to find.
Yep.
Chris, Terry still has her hand up.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry that I'm called second screen tonight, but I can't figure out how to rename myself. So sorry. I just want to say, Laura, sorry. I'm sorry. Laura, I just wanted to say thank you. We've talked about this a lot. We've gone over it, but seeing the way you put these in the grids was really helpful. So thank you very much for all of that. Thanks. That's all I got.
Oh, you just changed your name now. It says Terry. Good job, Terry. I'm not seeing any other online questions. So I believe that concludes our presentation. Thank you, Laura and Julie. We'll move on to administrative reports, and first up is the MVU administration. Oh, sorry, Don. Don, you're muted.
Yeah, now I am not. Okay. So Chris, I just wanted to add, and I want to thank Laura too, and I enjoyed reading that previously, but I think for all the people who have been asking questions either tonight or previously, we have professional auditors that audit our books every year. The reports, it takes a while for them to be generated by the auditors, but they do come into the office after we've had a very thorough review. We've used professional auditors for many years, and we've changed.
Don, you're muted again. Don, you're muted.
We're aware, Don.
I just think it's important people know that these books are audited. All these grant funds will be audited, whether they're in 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year cycles.
Okay. Once again, we'll move on to administrative reports, and first up is MVU.
Chris, I need to know who's speaking from you.
I believe Dan usually goes first, so we'll go with Dan Palmer from MVU.
There you go.
Right, Robert, am I unmuted?
Yes.
You are. Go
All
ahead.
right, excellent, thank you. Hopefully everybody got a copy of our administrative report. Up first is our parent-teacher conferences, both middle and high school. We'll be offering parent-teacher conferences on November 3rd and 4th. Parents have the option of doing them in person or virtually this year. They'll be held from 4 to 8 p.m. on both evenings, November 3rd and 4th. Information around signing up for conferences is going to be sent out via school messenger. So everybody who's got an email in our system will be able to receive that. It can also be found on our website and on our Facebook page as well. Parents can sign up via pick a time starting on October 20th, and instructions are provided to parents and caregivers about setting up a conference. We did institute a lunch change in the middle high school. We've modified the lunch procedure. And at this time we have, during their designated lunch blocks, Students will go on out, they go to the Abbey, they go through the line, they grab their lunch and they go back to the classrooms at this time. We were just finding that it was very hard to manage. Kids were going table to table and we're not really being responsible around that. And it was very hard to track where students were during that time. So we've asked them to go on out, they can grab their lunch, they can go to the a la carte line, but then they go back to their designated room where they're having lunch. Liz Mira, talking about some professional development. Liz Mira, our Vermont science consultant, worked with our teams, our science teams on September 28th, 29th, and 30th, just last week. We have worked with Liz for a number of years and are pleased to have her back in the building this year after a year of virtual PD. The teams are working on developing common assessments so they can track student progress data over time. And she will be back twice, 2 more times this year. Also on Thursday, October 14th, so next week is our first half day of in-service for the year. Our faculty and staff will be participating in professional development strands that'll extend through in-service days throughout the year. And we're excited to try this different model. And we're very lucky to have so many experts within our school community. And just a couple of examples of the professional development opportunities are Abenaki cultural competencies, writing across the curriculum, best practices for student discourse. We have a new teacher one where we kind of get our new teachers together, we support them, collaborative problem solving, SEL integration, just to name a few of those. We do have next Monday is Indigenous Peoples Day on the 11th. And we have a list of resources that teachers and students can access for various learning experiences that day, connected with our community's Abenaki heritage. And also we wanted to mention, give a shout out through Indian Education, the PAC committee, the Parent Advisory Committee, is making donations to the MVU School Library and to the other local libraries as well. Schools will be receiving between $250 and $500 worth of native titles from the Greenfield Press Review, which is the largest native press east of the Mississippi, and is owned by Abenaki community member Joe Bruchak. Brenda Gagne from the PAC president is the PAC president and coordinator of the Circle of Courage after school program will be responsible for ordering the books and making sure they get delivered on Indigenous Peoples Day. So we look forward to that next Monday. Just so people are aware, our vaccination clinic, our last vaccination clinic, which was to be held on October 11th, has been canceled at this time by AmCare. There has been no time that's been set to reschedule it. We put a copy of the newsletter in there as well. Hopefully people are accessing that. And the last real piece was Senior Parent Forum Night. There's going to be an informational meeting for both students and parents to ask any questions regarding the proficiency-based transcripts before the early action college deadlines. Jen Disorder, who has been on and off tonight, she's having some Wi-Fi issues, wanted to make sure that I was able to invite all the board members to that. The meeting is going to be held on October 20th at 5:30 in the MVU library. And that's it from the MVU administrators.
Thank you, Dan. Any question for MVU administration?
We have Toby.
Toby.
Yes, I have one. Mr. Palmer, there's some interest in the proficiency-based grading as of late, and I'm wondering if parents of juniors could have something. Well, I don't know what would be the best. I'm sure you want that meeting for just seniors, I'm assuming, but I think there's some younger students' parents who are interested in the concept. So what are your thoughts? Stay away from that meeting because that one's for seniors, and maybe something else? Or
what I can do is I can talk to Jen Disorder and Tyler Meggs, our director of guidance, and see if they could set something up for the younger ones.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
For the junior, sophomore.
Yeah. Just a thought, because I know my daughter's a junior, and I would like to be a little bit more comfortable with the understanding of it prior to senior year, just for the timeliness issue. So.
Yep.
Thanks for the consideration.
No problem.
Any more questions or comments for MVU administration? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to the superintendent presentation. update.
So there's a few things that I want to highlight, given the timeline, that we have a lot on our agenda. But I will also see if the administrators in central office, if there are any questions for them when I finish. I think the first thing I want to share with the board and the community is that we just really understand what a very difficult school year this is. And I want the board to understand the challenges that all schools are having, frankly, all sectors of the community are having in terms of staffing. We really we've talked a lot about our recovery plan. We had a lot of plans to hire additional folks, whether it's mental health providers. We certainly have hired some, but for example, NCSS can't fill all their positions. So even the positions we had last year, many of them we don't have because there's no one to provide those services. So all of those needs then press down on the system so that folks are taking on other jobs. I don't know an administrator that's not substituting for phys ed or art. Everybody is trying to cover. And it's a challenge. It's not just because of contact tracing, it's also because of stay home when sick, or it's because somebody just their child is sick, or they have another reason to be out on top of all of the rest of it. So we know how difficult it is. It's happening all over the state. It's a very big challenge. And usually I am trying to be the cheerleader who's saying we're gonna, and we will get through it because we have amazing people in all of our schools. But I just want to make people aware that even though we're being called a recovery plan and the Agency of Ed is saying publicly that they're not in recovery, they're in the middle of a pandemic, but schools will be in recovery. And they just keep giving us more things to take on in response for them. So I just want to acknowledge how incredibly hard our teachers, our support staff, and our administrators are working in our schools. They're doing a Herculean effort, and we understand when kids get study halls, that's not what we want them to be having. So I just wanted to make sure that I started with that because I think it's an important thing to acknowledge and for the board to understand. The next piece that I want to talk about is the testing initiative. A lot of people tonight spoke about contact tracing and sending kids home for quarantine. We don't actually get to decide that. The Department of Health tells us, oh, you have a positive. Well, these people, are considered close contact. And so these kids have to go home, and that's their protocol. And schools, school leaders like myself have been endlessly interacting with the Department of Health and the Agency of Ed to say, we understand that, and kids are being sent home. And at the same time, you're telling us that we really can't go remote. So we're really struggling with this contact tracing right now. It feels like it's taking a ton of time and that it is not really working. That is feedback we are giving them all the time. And one of the responses that came Friday at 4:40 in the afternoon, and of course the governor in press conferences will announce these things before they tell us, is that they are really trying to get us to switch from contact tracing to testing. And so they have rolled out multiple kinds of testing.
No way. No.
And obviously any kind of testing is always based on consent. So nobody can test anybody's child without written consent from a parent. So that just people need to know that.
They test themselves anyway.
What they are asking us to switch to, and our nurses have to be trained, all of those things will be coming in the next few weeks, is something called test to stay. So there would be rapid antigen testing that would allow students not to go home if they're a close contact, but they could stay in school as long as they are testing negatively. And there is also in-school PCR testing for students who would require that, again, only with consent. This would also be for staff. And the third is a take-home test for families. So if that is an option for them, and it could be students who are symptomatic and need to stay home. So a parent comes and gets a kit and brings it home to their child. So they're also talking about the regular surveillance testing again, which is an opt-in. You have to consent to it. Nobody can test your child in any of these methods without written consent. That is the state's answer to contact tracing. It has apparently been successful in some other states, although I do have, and the nurses and other school leaders have concerns about the implementation of it, the logistics of it. So it's it could require staffing we don't yet have. There's a lot to be worked out there. Sometimes it's tough when the governor says something in a press conference and then families will say, well, when can I get my take-home test? And we don't have them, no one's trained. You know, it's going to take a while for us to even figure out which of these makes sense for our school. So we're having meetings over the next week or so with nurses, and they will have training, and then we'll reconvene and determine which we can offer logistically to families. I also wanted to make one comment really clear that the vaccination attestation paperwork people are getting is not about the grant. It is about getting at that rate where the governor says people can take masks off. And of course, as people rightly pointed out, he's kicked that can down the road. I think it's November 1st at this point. But that is why schools right now are looking for that information. It's to see if once they reach a school, once a school reaches 80% of an eligible student population, then everyone can take off their mask. There would be no difference between a child who's vaccinated and not vaccinated. There would be no segregation of kids based on that status. Staff and students, no matter whether they're vaccinated or not, would be able to take off their mask. That is what the Agency of Ed and Department of Health's plan is. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that piece. And that's, and I can, the other piece I wanted to, I could speak to also is the Vermont School Board Association Conference. I want to make sure that the board knows that that has switched to a virtual format. It's no longer at Lake Maury, and that it will be on the 4th. The annual meeting will be at 6:30. There are Dr. Lavelle Brown will be speaking, and I am not sure who the speaker is on the 5th. That information has not come out, but your registration information should be coming up shortly.
Chris, we have a couple of questions here.
Yep. I also have a board member. Toby's got his hand raised. So we'll start with, well, I guess first, who has questions in the audience?
Say anyways.
Oh, Casey Myers.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yes, so I told you I spoke to Karen Conroy today, who's the Canaan superintendent. And she said that when they do quarantine, that they are offering, like allowed to offer the virtual schooling. Kids are not marked absent. And it's just, I'm confused as, I don't understand why you have to keep reporting to the DOH and the AOE when we're not in a state of emergency. Like, you guys have the power for everything over the schools. I don't understand why it keeps going back to that. Like, and she informed me, I mean, she had a lot of information for me, which I appreciated it so much, because I'm trying to understand this. You make the decisions. It's not on anybody but you guys. You can say, we're going a different path, just like Canaan did. Canaan is successful right now. Their kids are in school. Are there COVID cases? Yeah, there's COVID cases, but they're successful. Their children are still in school. They are not masked. They are not at the 80%. Why can't we follow those guidelines? These are our decisions. It's not on anybody but us. And you keep faulting it to the DOH and the AOE, just like when we have the COVID cases, you don't call the parents. The poor nurses call the parents. And they're getting all the backlash because now these people are having to try and figure out how to work and live and quarantine their kids for 2 weeks waiting for these tests. And the Canaan people have had these tests. They have the rapid 30-minute tests. How are they so far ahead of us and we're still back here? I don't understand.
Julie, would you like to tackle that?
I can answer some of it. I can't answer why Karen's school day, and I know Karen well. What they're calling remote and not remote. We offer instructional, for kids who, when a whole class is out. We've been told by the Secretary of Education that we can offer things to help kids stay on track, but not have it be as if they're in school. And again, I can't, that's what we've been told, and lots of people make other decisions.
You don't question that yourself.
I know have made.
That's okay for our kids, for you?
I don't want kids to be sent home because of COVID any more than anyone else.
Well, and Secretary French was at their board meeting yesterday. He attended the board meeting and they had his full support. I don't know. I just don't understand. If these are the questions that can't be answered, I suppose we need to start looking into it. I mean, Canaan is being singled out. In fact, they started getting threats from people who weren't even in their communities when their community was doing fine, on the sole purpose that they were being singled out. The governor singled them out as one community, the only school in Vermont that did this. And we have to figure out why. How are they being so successful? I mean, aren't these questions you want answered? Don't you want to have a successful year? All parents being happy? I mean, they're succeeding. They're doing it. I don't understand how these are not questions that are being asked. And I don't know. I want my kids to get an education. They need to be in school. They want to be in school. I would be setting them up for failure if I kept them home, and I don't want to do that. I work with kids in the school. I know the staffing issues. I know everything that's going on, but we have to figure out how to fix it. And we're talking about all this money that is being poured into the schools and that we have readily available for us, but how about the underpaid teachers? How about the overworked teachers? That needs to be the focus. We need to keep these teachers happy, and I'm just too frustrated. I'm sorry that I got off track. But somebody, you had a question.
No, I'm good. I'm all set now.
Is it possible,
Chelsea Lumber, is it possible to get Secretary French here for a meeting? It seems he's starting to attend those.
We can look into that.
Thank you.
Next up is Toby.
Julie, I know, I think Steve mentioned it in public comment, but I'm curious too, especially with the October 4th, original October 4th deadline. When will we, is there any harm in letting us know now where our school district's at? I'm particularly interested in MVU, obviously, because they're all vaccination age.
Right.
Because even if I'm still optimistic that I granted he pushed it down to November, but I'm still optimistic. I'm going to remain positive because I want all kids out of masks. And as you stated, if we hit that target, even though it's been moved to November, every kid's out of masks. Right. So do we know where we're at? And can you share that with us?
I don't know that now because we haven't had very many people return the paperwork.
Good. Sorry.
Right. That's so that's kind of as a board, I think we need to talk about that because one of my biggest fears is that we could be at 80%. I know that I'm going to be optimistic, and if it's just because people aren't handing in their vaccinated forms, that to me it's very frustrating because we could get all kids out of masks if it's just a matter of getting those attestations in. I don't know what the solution is there, but just my thoughts, some initial thoughts.
Okay, next.
Do you think it's okay to hold?
Just a minute,
masks
please.
off?
Next up, just a minute. Next up is Megan Medler.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just have a quick question for Julie. I know that you had just stated, once the governor says it's okay to unmask, that we're going to unmask. But as we all know, he's been very wishy-washy. And are you guaranteeing that once the governor says we're going to be unmasked, that every child is going to be unmasked? Because I'm curious because I have a feeling this is going to be said by him because he's hinted at it, says that unvaccinated people need to remain in masks and vaccinated people can unmask. What is going to be your stance then? Because you just assured us that nobody would be segregated.
Right. Oh boy, Megan, I really hate to anticipate what either Secretary French or Governor Scott will say or do, because they change their mind sometimes. And we've been through a couple of years of that. Right, as of right now, the guidance is that everybody is wearing a mask up until, and then the governor kicks that out a couple times. And then when the eligible population of students in a school building, and for us, that's MVU, reaches the 80% bar, then all students and all staff can be unmasked. I have not heard any hints about him doing something different for kids who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I would hope that he doesn't do that. I think it's a setup. I also hope that should we not reach the 80%, that the conditions just change enough so that the governor says it's okay, people can just take their masks off. That is our hope, that if we don't meet that, that the conditions change, because I am hopeful that they will change significantly in time.
They can change.
But I can't answer what he might do, but I haven't heard any hints, and I would really hope that he would not do something like that.
Okay, next up, says iPhone, so I'm not sure who it is.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Okay. Raymond Tardif, I spoke last meeting. There's one person in this area, and I just don't want to try and take what she just barely said out of context, but there's one person in this scenario, as you've already voted, that has the power over these restrictions and taking these masks off, and that's Julie. And so really, she has the opportunity right now to answer these questions with definitive answers, because you as the board have given her this power. Okay, there may be recommendations above her, but maybe we need, I said maybe last time we need to replace some board members. Maybe we need to replace somebody to get some leadership in there to, okay, we're not just going to do everything we're told every time. We can look at our own situation, which is really not all that bad. Okay, no child has been ill to speak of. No staff member, to my knowledge, has been ill to speak of. I mean, can we really start focusing on creating a strategy to get ourselves out of this and not tie it to somebody else? Right. Let's have it be about us and getting our kids to move forward, because let's face it, you have to admit you're not being as effective as educators worrying about all this COVID nonsense as you would be if you weren't. So I think that that's got to be addressed somewhere here. We need to start solving the problem ourselves. Thank you.
He covered what I was gonna cover, so we're good.
And do they?
Okay, Robert, the public has a comment. Who there has one or a question?
We have one.
Tammy Underwood. When we're talking about the 80% vaccination rate, do you really think that it's fair or moral to hold mask usage or the lack thereof hostage by way of vaccine? An experimental gene therapy, by the way, that hasn't even been approved by the FDA. That is insanity.
I definitely hear that. And I understand that that is a lot of people's perspective. And I am not the governor and I am not the Department of Health making those recommendations. I don't love that they're trying.
We don't have to listen to him.
Right.
There's no
choose.
state of emergency.
Just let us choose. Let us choose.
And
We
don't-
do not need to make
And don't tie
decisions
the
for our
masks.
children. We are capable. Let us choose. That's
Stop
all we
passing the
want.
buck to And don't tie the mask
Stop
usage
pointing
to
your
the
fingers.
vaccines.
Stop passing the buck. We want choice for our own children and stop going like this.
Because that's what you're doing.
Let us have it. Governor Scott said it's up to you. And we want a choice.
Okay, next up is Devin, then after that is Toby.
Just wanted to clarify one item in terms of who has the decision-making authority and who's implementing the guidelines. Julie does not have the authority to make decisions. The board voted to authorize her to implement the guidance of the state. So it is the board who has made that choice, and it is Julie does not have wiggle room on this. So if we're gonna have these conversations, it's important that we have them rightly. And so it is a decision of the board. And so let's make sure we're maintaining that focus there and that everyone understands that. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Devin. Toby retracted his question. Somebody in public has a question. Can you please announce your name?
Yep, Kaylee Severy. So you stated that Julie does not have the full control, but you also have said you voted to give her the control to make the decision. So what is it and who do we need to speak to? Because again, you're going like this. Go here, go there, talk to this way. Stop. We are never going to get anywhere if you guys continue to do this. It is either A or B. She has the choice or you school board members do. So who is it and who do we need to speak to?
And it's not the governor, and
It's not
Dr.
right.
Levine,
Like, come
it's
on, you guys. Come on. I would rather be putting my kids to bed right now. I'm missing out on putting my kids to bed because I have to be here. This is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
My child's health and well-being is none of your business. And I want to know who to talk to because I'm sick and tired of you pointing in the other direction. Saying, oh, it's Julie, oh, it's this, oh, it's the governor, oh, it's whatever. The governor has said it's up to the superintendent and the board. And you board members said that you gave the power to Julie. You voted on it, correct? Please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm trying to understand it. I want choice.
Chris, can I jump back in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, I just wanted to correct you because that is incorrect. I'm attempting to point the finger directly at the board. She doesn't have authority to make decisions. She has the authority to operationalize the decision of the board. At the moment, the board has agreed that we voted to implement the guidance from the state. That is the guidance we have elected to to implement. And so it is the board that made that decision, recognizing the expertise of those people. And I think that's what the statement that Chris published earlier on alludes to. So just to clarify that, the finger points at the board.
So why do the board members kind of point to her in emails then? I mean.
Julie's the operational leader.
It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. I'm so sick of you guys doing this, making us chase our tails. It's exhausting.
Okay, Terry?
Yeah, I would just like to make a few comments. Number one, I agree that it is the board who has made this decision and that Julie is the operational person. The other thing I would like to say is it seems kind of strange to me that Canaan is the only school district that hasn't followed the state guidelines. Number one, they discuss how rural they are, how few people they have in that community. And number three, there are people in that community who are very upset about that. You maybe don't hear from them. Because,
Three of them.
I don't think it's three, but we could.
I don't talk to anybody that I talked to this afternoon.
How do you know that? They pulled every person in that town. And also, I remember reading that one woman said,
Have you polled every person in this community?
Can we please let one person talk at a time? Terry's up right now.
Thank you. I have the floor right now. Thank you. So I think it might be a good idea that maybe we will, I think Chris, you're right. I'd like to see us try and get Dr. French on here. I have been involved in different meetings. I have talked to different school boards around the state. I have talked to, and you can do research with one doctor in Florida, but you can do other research with other people. So it really depends on where we're getting our information. And we can agree to disagree. As someone said, it's scientists, not science. But typically it's kind of like, I don't really want to fight with you all. I just want to say we are spinning our heads. There are so many kids who are having problems in our school. And as a school board, we are spending all our time talking about masks. We aren't talking about the kids that are falling through the cracks. And that really concerns me right now. So I understand your concern for your children. There are a lot of children who aren't healthy. There are a lot of children who aren't able to study. There are a lot of students who this is emotionally searing for them on both sides of the issue. And I'm tired of this. I'd like us to get to the regular school board meeting things that we have to do for the sake of every child in our community.
So Terry, if I could just make a comment, in order to get rid of all of that, all we have to do is start living our lives as we always have. And if you're sick, you stay home. That solves having to quarantine. It solves having to wear masks. It solves having kids have these social and emotional problems because they're living normally. We can make the decision to have our children. We can make the decision to I see these children in school. There are kids who I cannot have conversations with unless I'm outside with them because that's the only time they can take their masks off. That's not normal. These kids don't see facial expressions. They don't see smiles. They can't recognize a face to see that it's safe because we are masked. These problems are coming from you guys continually implementing all of these protocols that are so unnecessary. We need to live with this virus. And that is what the superintendent's advice was to me when I got off the phone with her this morning was, we need to live with this virus. It is not going away.
Never.
It is not dangerous to our children, and yet we are making them feel like they are lepers and keeping these masks on them and making them social distance. This is unacceptable. This could all go away. It is heartbreaking working in the schools. It is heartbreaking seeing these children. And do you know why teachers and staff stay there? It's because those children are important to them. It's because they want to see them succeed. You're doing the wrong thing. Stop this. Get the masks off our children and stop these ridiculous protocols. We don't need any more testing. We need to stop the testing. We need to live with this. That's how we end this. That's how we make so our children succeed, is stop it. Stop it.
Okay, next up is Kimberly DeLorme. I might have butchered that last name.
It's okay. It's DeLorme. Honestly, I think as a whole, we all agree with Terry. I think we want to get back to normal. We don't want to. Do you think all of us parents with small children, including all of you, Do you think we want to be on this until 8:39, 9:30 at night? Absolutely, we don't want to. All we are asking, all we have ever asked is please just don't mandate it. We have not, everyone is making us sound like we are monsters. We are so terrible. You read any newspaper and we are just the worst people ever. I think we've really kept our composure and we're not asking too much. And I think that, yes, I'm sure there are angry parents in Cannon and I'm sure that they don't like it, but they've come up with a solution for those families. Those families can mask their children, or they are paying tuition to go to another school that does mandate the mask. So I guess I just don't understand what the problem is here. And like, I'm very offended, Terry, that you are pushing blame on all of us. We're just concerned parents. I don't know if you have kids or not, but I think if you had young children in school that are our age, maybe you may feel a little different about this. I mean, we are just parents trying to do the right thing. No one knows what's right now. No one knows what's wrong, but us as parents to do for our children. And I think that anybody that says different, that's a real problem. And maybe you should not be sitting on the board if that is how you feel.
Okay. That is the last hand I see up. So at this time, we will move on. Next up, let's see. Next up is new business. And first thing under new business is snowplow bids.
Chris, would you like me to share this screen that
yeah, go ahead,
identifies the recommendations of the task force?
Right. Now, do we need to do one action for each school, one motion for each school?
One motion for each contractor.
Okay. So first up, we have Franklin. We met last night as a task force. We got 4 bids in Franklin. The lowest bid, lowest qualified bid was Dairy Construction out of Fairfield. They checked all the boxes, said they have the equipment. One thing if the bid goes forward, we require a list of equipment. They haven't provided that yet, but that would be after we award. Once again, they were the lowest, came with good recommendations. So the task force recommendation for Franklin would be Dairy Construction. I'd entertain a motion to accept that bid.
Do you need me to
Don's the
stop?
first. Devin's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting Dairy Construction's snowplow bid for Franklin, raise your hand. Terry, what's your vote? Okay, motion carries 6-0. So next up is Highgate. Once again, this one we received 5 bids. The lowest bid was another dairy. It's a different person, Sydney Dairy. Once again, came highly recommended, was the lowest bid. And so our recommendation is to move forward with Sydney Dairy for Highgate. Don's a first, second. Devin's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting Sydney Dairy for plow in Highgate, raise your hand. Joanne, Were you a yes or a no? A yes. Okay, motion carries 6-0. Sorry, it takes me a minute. I gotta thumb through all the screens to see everybody. Okay, so the next one is Swanton, MVU, and Central Office. All three of them. Dick's Construction bid on all three. They were the lowest bid on all three, and Dick's Construction actually already does MVU, so we have previous experience. I believe they do Central Office also. They don't currently do Swanton, but they were the lowest bidder in Swanton. So the task force recommendation is to accept Dick's Construction for Swanton, Central Office, and MVU. Don's first for that. Devin's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor. Oops, hang on. Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting Dick's Construction for Swanton, MVU, and Central Office, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Okay, next up under new business is the proxy for the Mvsd and VHI meeting.
Yes, every year there is a business meeting for VHI and for Mvsd, and you typically will vote me to be your proxy. The VHI meeting has no actual voting business this time. The Mvsd meeting does. I think they're voting on new director. But typically you would elect me as your proxy. I will attend those meetings virtually and get the information and vote if appropriate. So I guess we're just asking for that motion.
Don's a first.
No,
Oh,
Donna.
just a minute, Don has a question. Go ahead, Don.
Yes, I want to thank Julie for her willingness to do this. It can be a school board member. In recent years, no school board member has indicated that he or she wanted to take that responsibility. And so I think Winton before Julie maybe did it some years. So I certainly support Julie, but I do think, and both Julie and I have supported people getting involved with the SBA, that if there's somebody who really wants to do this, they should speak up tonight. If not, then if no one speaks in the next 3 seconds, I'm going to take in support a motion to have Julie represent us and then think about next year. So that's my motion.
So Don's the first of accepting Julie as our proxy for Mvsd and VHI. Terry's the second. All those in favor, raise your hand. No, any discussion, sorry, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Next up under new business is third-party administrator contract extension.
And Bonnie, is Bonnie here?
I think I'm going to present this.
Okay.
Bonnie did secure the documents though and do the research. So thank you, Bonnie. So what we have included in the drive and what this content is that it's a time to renew our third-party administrator for our health saving or health medical spending accounts. That would include our health reimbursement accounts as well as our flex plans. This does operate on a calendar year. So this would be from January 1, 2022 to December 2022. I would like to point out that this is a 1-year renewal. It would be with Further, or as we refer to it as Further, but it is Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont, My Money Services, but they operate under the name of Further. Mvsd has solicited bids for this third-party administration, and again, the recommendation is to continue with this company. They have agreed to level fund their fee structure so that the fees would be the same as they are in 21. And so I'm looking for a approval to have Julie execute this document for 2022.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to have Julie execute this contract extension. Devin's the first. Terry's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of having Julie execute the contract extension, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. And lastly, under new business is a letter of intent to retire.
So you saw the letter that Mr. Gregoire sent. Actually, he sends an email and I put it in a little, as a document, so you can see it in a letter form rather than an email. Paul is going to retire as of December 20th. I believe Dawn, this is the topic that Dawn wanted to refer to executive session for a finding that it would be a confidential contract conversation.
Right. So with that, we'll move on. We'll do our executive all at the end. That way we can keep things moving along. At this time, we'll move on to old business. First up under old business is check warrants. Not sure. Steve usually reads them. He's not here tonight. So Laura, can you at least read the amounts and then I can get the motion from that?
Yes. So these are the check warrants for the month of September. We have accounts payable at $1,146,366.01. Payroll checks, $40,385.32. Payroll other disbursements is $1,484,362.95. Payroll deductions, $589,626.81, for a total for the month of September of $3,260,741.09.
Okay, at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept check warrants as read. Devin's the first. Joanne's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting check warrants as read, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Let's check warrant cover page, September 21. Is that
That's just the check warrant link. Yep.
Okay, moving on, old business policy adoption. And the first one on our list is the employee unlawful harassment.
Yes, that was, we shared that with the board. You had a first reading last time. There were very minimal changes in that document. That change of this mandated required policy was a title and the training language. So we would recommend that the board move that for adoption.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to move for adoption on employee unlawful harassment. Terry's the first. Don's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving forward on the employee unlawful harassment policy, raise your hand. I lost. Oh, there. Motion carries 6-0. Okay, next up is English.
Yes.
English learners.
Learners. And let me see. That policy was a change of title. So we would recommend that for adoption.
Okay. Entertain a motion to accept English learners policy. Devin's first. Joanne's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting English learners policy, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Next up is the firearms policy.
That policy had to have a change from the, used to be instead of the Department of Children and Department for Children and Families, it used to be Social Rehabilitative Services. So it was literally that needed to be changed. And as we had discussed previously, we added some language that other districts had added around aiding other students. And we also put links to the Gun-Free School Act and definitions that are there. So we would, we had all positive comments from the board members who gave input. So we would recommend that for adoption.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adopt firearms policy. Dawn first. Devin's a second. Any discussion? Terry. Oop. Maybe she was early on the vote. Are we ready to vote then? All those in favor of accepting the firearms policy, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Next up is the travel policy.
Similarly, that is, we already have a travel policy, but that's one that we updated. The board didn't have any comments for changes, so we would look to adopt that policy, F1.
This time, I would entertain a motion to adopt the travel policy. Terry's the first. Joanne's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the travel policy, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Next up is the capitalization policy.
Same thing as the last one. We shared that with the board for comment and there were no changes requested. So we would request the board adopt the capitalization policy F23.
I'd entertain, Terry's the first. Entertain a motion to accept the capitalization policy. Terry's the first. Devin's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the capitalization policy, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0. And last up is the procurement policy.
Same as others, there were no suggestions for changes. So we would ask the board to make a motion to adopt F24, the procurement policy.
Okay, entertain a motion to adopt the procurement policy. Terry's the first. Devin's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Six. Motion carries 6-0. Okay, that concludes our policies. So moving on under old business is FY20 financial audit information.
It's pretty thick.
It's pretty thick, and I have to tell you that a combination, this is our first year combining 5 separate entities and $40 million into one. And so that presented quite a challenge for not only us, but the auditing firm as well. And you pair that with all the extra revenue that we've received due to the pandemic. And thank goodness the state had given us a waiver, a 6-month waiver to submit to the clearinghouse our audit materials. So typically our audits do get submitted to the clearinghouse by March 31st every year. For fiscal year 20, again, they did issue a 6-month waiver, and so we just met that deadline. We were working quite closely for the last couple of weeks with RHR Smith. And again, this year for fiscal year 21, there has already been a waiver issued as well. Part of the reason for that, like I said, is because of the level of federal funding that we received or will be receiving in these fiscal years. And that typically triggers, especially in a school district our size, an additional single federal audit, which requires quite a lot of backup documentation to be provided and review and compliance review as well. So I did provide a copy of the fiscal year 20 audit and the backup materials in the shared drive for you. Please take a look at it at your leisure. Email me or call with questions, or if you want to walk through it with us, we'd be happy to do that as well, or have the audit firm do that here in the office with you. I just want to point out a couple of key pages in case it helps you kind of get your bearings a little bit. Page 16 is where you'll notice under the general fund, under committed and under unassigned, under our governmental funds, that's basically our balance sheet. You'll notice under committed funds and unassigned, and the total of those fund balances makes over our total carryover at the end of fiscal year 20. The committed of the 888,000 is what we use to offset the next year's taxes, and then the other 2 million was uncommitted, and so we would offset the next year's taxes with that as well. I'd like to draw your attention to also page 18. I know last year, Don, you had asked where you could see the bond expenditures, and so I just wanted to point that out. That would be on statement E. That's page 18. You can notice what we spent and what we received in bond proceeds there. Also, page 75 and 76, those are general fund revenues and expenditures. The expenditures obviously is Schedule B, and it goes on for multiple pages. But if you're looking for a detailed outline of how we spent our funds as far as function codes, you'll notice that there on those pages 75 and 76 and forward. Special revenue, so that's all of our grant funding. That starts on page 82. That's title funding, Idea B, special ed grants, local grants, all that special revenue. That starts with Schedule C on 82. And then lastly, the part I like to highlight is the report of compliance for each major program and internal control over compliance. And this basically outlines that we've followed the rules. We are compliant for fiscal year 20. And then on the back page, it outlines the fact that we did not have any findings. And so I consider that to be very remarkable given the work that we've done in this office. So I'd like to thank my staff for that and take a minute to really tell you how hard they've been working to make sure that we were accounting for things the way that we needed to. And this has been a tough, fiscal year 21 was a tough year, and we're still in tough years, but I just want to tell you how hard our staff is working to make sure that we are on top of things here in the business office.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with that. Toby. Any other questions for the FY20? Oh, Devin.
I just wanted to echo what Laura said. It's extremely difficult to be able to handle the financials for a whole year on an organization this size and end up with no management notes or comments here. So Laura, please, extend our gratitude to your whole team and thank you as well.
Don.
Yes, it looks like we're really in good shape, and that's always good news. This question is for Devin. Does the finance committee sit down with Laura once this draft has come in and as we go forward? Do you have involvement, or is it mainly just the information comes through to the full board?
At this point, it's come through the full board, but I think that's something that the finance committee probably ought to take up ahead of time. I think that's a good point. We should do that.
Yeah,
do that next time around.
Yeah, I do it in fairness to the business office because I think we have found that the facilities committee is some help and has relieved some of the maybe time that we would discuss good that we don't discuss so much at the board meeting, but I don't think so. I think the facility committee has helped really be very helpful. So I'll leave it at that and you people take it from there.
Okay. I don't see any more questions or comments, so we can move on to the FY22 financial report.
I will say that our fiscal year 21 audit week, our site visit was actually last week. So a lot of that work has started simultaneously with finalizing fiscal year 20, and that's not typical, but we are starting that work here. I will share my screen for another moment so I can project the financial report. And I won't take up a lot of time because it's already late. I can't get it over here. And so this reflects your financial report for the current fiscal year. That's fiscal year 22. This is your typical cover page that you're used to seeing. This is the first report for this current year. You will notice, I'm sure your eyes went instantly to the projected carryover or deficit on the bottom of the page. That number is quite large at this time. We have, obviously it's very early in the year. We are still working to identify some anticipated expenses. But I can tell you that we have many, maybe the word we should use, open positions. We also have several contracted services that are still anticipated to be filled, but not yet filled. And so we're not encumbering those funds at this time. We are on the wait list for some of those contracted services with NCSS for things like autism contracts, school-based clinicians, CAT workers, but those are yet to be filled. And so we're filling them in those needs in different ways at the moment, but I'm not encumbering those expenses. Also, we're continue to utilize Esser funding to the maximum potential. I think the maximum potential, but trying to also be strategic about what we spend these Esser funds on. Larger pools of money and larger strategies rather than piecemealing the Esser funds, because there is a lot of regulation to think about as far as procurement and documentation, time documentation. And so we've taken larger expenses or groups of expenses such as tutoring or summer support or all of our sanitation supplies, and we've moved those into Esser, which is currently freeing up money in the general fund for other items if we need them. That's not to say that that might move around a little bit, but right now that is definitely contributing to this large projected carryover. The other thing I would like to point out as far as the revenue side, due to some of the things that I just mentioned, our special ed expenditures are projected at the moment to be significantly lower than what we budgeted. And so I've altered our intensive reimbursement here under special ed aid down about $300,000. That's obviously very fluid at the moment, just like everything else. But I think it's important to identify. Also, I'd like to mention under federal grant revenues on the bottom of this cover page under revenues, you'll notice that we are anticipating less title funding here, utilization of less title funding here, but that will be updated in the next draft. This was prior to accessing our carryover funds. We now have that available to us. So we'll be updating that. We will be maximizing our title funding or CFP funding prior to accessing general fund or any other federal fund for those resources, which is how we budgeted.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions about the FY22 financial report? Seeing none, we can move on. Okay, that concludes old business. Now we're on to other business. And first up under other business is board goals committee update, which I'm not sure Terry or Joanne. Terry. Sorry, Joanne. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't think I could unmute myself. I haven't had to yet tonight. So just keeping it short and sweet. We met about 10 days ago and Wanted to just put out a thank you to Peter and Dawn because they took the time and joined us and put in some insight. So we talked obviously about our goals, just trying to lay out foundation of, you know, what direction we need to take. So it really seemed like the priority was going to be policies. And I don't know if Julie wants to touch on this or not, but she's going to be sending out a survey, if she hasn't already sent out a survey, for recommended policies from like Vermont School Board Association. So it's going to be really important for everyone to take some time. I think it's going to take some time to go through those policies and do the survey for us so that we can see where people feel the importance is, what new policies we need to bring on. Obviously, we'll review older policies. We'll take a look at those. So we're just familiarize ourselves with policies. Our other goal is advocacy, the legislative meetings, and just, you know, participating or signing up for more of the trainings that the VSBA puts out. So we'll look into those and see, you know, what would be beneficial, what interest us, which trainings that we should sign up for. And then of course, you know, community engagement. And I think one of the things that Peter actually brought up when he was with us was kind of a calendar of events. You know, he's like, maybe it would just be helpful for board members if it was all, you know, one place. We could see what the different towns have going on, whether it's a select board meeting, whether it's a, you know, school function, whether it's a local tractor parade that I know Franklin likes to put on around the holidays, that we can, you know, go to and participate in. I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Palmer, because I know I put on my calendar the senior parent forum on the 20th. So I will definitely like to be there and just listen in and see what's happening, what the changes are. And and I put the concert on my calendar, so I thought that was kind of neat. So just, I don't know, we'll meet again in a few weeks. And as far as the district, Kosha and Julie were very informative. Obviously, we won't get into it tonight, but as far as the recovery plan, which I believe now has, Kosha is calling it the continuous improvement team. Was the term that she was using for us. So that was good. And the scores are going to be coming back in. Or last week, I think was the ending of some of the testing, and November will be, I'm pretty sure, I don't want to misspeak for Kosha, but the new scoring is going to come in. And then obviously teacher retention, which we didn't touch too much on, but I know with the new committee that should be coming in, we'll need some insight on that. Try to wrap it up as quickly and efficiently as I could. I don't know if anybody has any questions or if Terry wants to add on. I know she wasn't feeling too well this afternoon, but Obi or Terry? Devin?
Did a great job. Actually, it made me think of something else too. Last meeting, we had set up a professional negotiations committee, and we volunteered Joanne to do it because she wasn't here, and she's graciously agreed to do it. So our negotiations committee will be myself, Terry, and Joanne. Okay, thank you. Any questions for the board goals committee? What was that, Toby? You're muted. Okay, so moving on, we have the facility committee. We met last night, and we actually discussed quite a bit about snow plows, bids and whatnot. That was the primary reason for our meeting. We do have another meeting, I believe it's October 20th, where we're actually going to be meeting with Mike Davey and Eric Lafayette from EEI. They have some plans for a possible centralized pre-K building. And also they're going to put together some plans on what we can do with the with Highgate Elementary School, because we do have the bond proceeds that needs to be used next summer. And then of course we're looking at how far we can go with this, as far as, do we do a complete renovation? Do we do a smaller scale? But this is where we're going to have a chance to do a much deeper dive into these topics, because they're going to bring plans and price sheets and stuff like that. And it's an open meeting, so if anybody wants to go, especially on the board, if you're interested, you're more than welcome to come. I believe we'll be in the Commons at MVU, but I'm not positive on that. It might be virtual too. We'll have to decide when we get closer. Don, did I cover it or? Okay, so that's it from the Finance Committee. Any questions for us? Seeing none, we'll move on. Future agenda items, we still have Act 73 update on there. We have the Crossroads after school program and an update from our SRO topic. Our next.
I'm sorry to throw it in there, but I think at our next meeting, it's important that we choose a delegate for the VSBA annual meeting. You may want to spend some time talking about proposed resolutions that will be voted on at the VSBA meeting at the beginning of November. So we should probably put those on the next agenda.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other future agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. Oops, Toby. You're muted.
There we go. Now, okay, that's it. I just wanted to be unmuted before we go into executive session. So sorry. Thanks.
Okay. And then next up is future board meeting. Our next one is Thursday, October 21st, 6:30. We'll probably do the same format with a virtual option and a public space available. So at this time, unless somebody has something else to add, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for discussion of personnel contract, I believe it was. Don's the first. And we're inviting in Julie.
Yes, I just, Robert is going to hang out for a few minutes just to make sure that the whole meeting doesn't end.
Yep.
But I will text him. He won't be a part of executive session.
Right. So Don's the first. Devin's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of going in executive session at 9:05, raise your hand. Motion carries 6-0.